Hey everybody, I'm April, that's Cass, and we have a special guest tonight, my oldest daughter, Kenzie Butler. Yay! We've been looking forward to having Kenzie with us, and we've never got to have you with us, so welcome.
Thank you.
So everybody that hadn't met Kenzie before, she is responsible for a lot of the stuff that we do on Roots and Wings, just hadn't got to see her doing this yet. And she's been posting all the Advent, and those have been great.
Good.
Thanks for doing those.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thanks for
You're
all
welcome.
that you do. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, we've been talking about characters of the Bible, the Christmas story, and we've covered Elizabeth, and we've covered Mary, and we've covered Joseph. So today is our last one that we'll have before Christmas, so we need to talk about the other characters. So the shepherds, and the angel Gabriel, and the other angels, right? And then the wise men actually didn't appear during the Christmas story, but they do usually make an appearance in most people's rendition of the Christmas story. So let's start talking about the shepherds. What y'all got on the shepherds? Go ahead, Kenzie. Tell us.
Take it away.
Yeah, take it away, Kenzie.
Well, I work at a church in Alabama, and we've been kind of talking about the same thing of the significance of the characters that we sometimes don't really put significance towards. And it's so interesting because shepherds, I mean, obviously we all kind of know they're dirty. Like, they're not the best job. It's not really what people aspire to be in this time. And one commentator, even said that this was the despised class. Like, if you were a shepherd, you couldn't go to the temple and worship because you were ceremonially unclean. Like, you stayed out, you weren't in the house with anybody. It just wasn't the most fun job.
So they were kind of quarantined out into the fields, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they were dirty, they had sheep poop and bugs and lived in it just wasn't a fun time. And so I think it's super interesting to see how God picked the shepherds to be the ones who first heard about it when they weren't even allowed to go worship in church. And so they were the ones who actually first got to worship Jesus face to face, and yet they couldn't go and worship in the temple. And so I think whenever we look at kind of the whole of the Christmas story, you really see God pouring his power into the powerless. I mean, Mary and Joseph had zero power, and they're the ones that were chosen. And then the shepherds have zero power, and they're the first ones that are chosen to go worship. And I mean, I think, it's beautiful in its own sense, but it's really cool to think about how I'm powerless. And so that's the perfect person that God wants to use.
Right.
And so I just like the thought of he picks the powerless to come to first. So
It kind of set the standard, didn't it? Like the first standard. And also that they were the first preachers, because they were the first to actually talk about it and spread the good news of Jesus. So not only were they the first that the angels appeared to spread the news of Jesus' birth, but they were the first to then take that light and take that news out and spread it among the common people back in their town. So yeah, the shepherds had a bigger job there than we sometimes give them credit in that story.
Well, and I think about too, we kind of dub them a minor character, but one of the things that I hadn't really thought about until I was working on it at church the other day was this kind of starts this cyclical theme throughout the Gospels of emphasizing the role of a shepherd, because you have the shepherds being the first one who get the message and then share the message and worship. And then in the Gospel of John, you have Jesus calling himself, I am the good shepherd. And so you have Jesus really embodying this idea. And then at the end of John, you have Peter being told by Jesus, feed my sheep, tend my flock. So be a shepherd. And so it's kind of interesting to see how God continues to emphasize this idea of shepherds when everybody else despised them and didn't really want to be them.
Me?
Yeah.
Herb says y'all can't see me. This has been a really good one, then. You don't have to look at me.
Sorry.
I don't know that I can move that way anymore. And the shepherds, I was thinking while you were saying that, even the job of a shepherd was kind of looked down upon. I was thinking about David being a shepherd boy, and remember how his brothers, when he came to the I can't think of the valley there where he fought Goliath. They said, you know, you just just a shepherd, you know. So everybody kind of looked down on them, didn't they? They didn't really have any respect. It wasn't. It was a hard work. It was like what we would consider like even a less than a blue collar worker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And and yet that was the one that not only got the first news, but got it by a band of angels. I like to think about that. Think about what was that you were telling us the other day about the angels? It never says they were in the sky.
Yeah, you never really hear about angels flying in the Bible. That's kind of
Right.
something that we've just come up with on our own. The only time you hear about that is like in the prophetic books where they talk about like cherubims like flying around the throne room of God. But one of my friends asked me when we were talking about this story, like, "Oh, Kinsey, like were the angels in the sky that night?" And I'm like, "What?" Like thinking he was trying to confuse me. He's like, "No, really, were the angels in the sky that night?" And I actually like pulled out the Bible and looked at it. And it does not say anywhere in there. And I'm like, oh, well, duh. Like, angels were kind of just normal looking people. And they weren't flying around with halos. They weren't what we have stereotyped as angels nowadays. And so it's kind of interesting to then repicture this whole scene happening of just all of a sudden, like, boom, all these people are out in the field with the shepherds, which makes sense as to why they were filled with great fear.
Like, where did them angels come from?
Just like all
if
of
they
a
didn't
sudden
come from the
they're just
sky,
hanging.
though.
Yeah.
But so we're in Luke 2, and I was looking at we start in verse 8 there, talking about the shepherds, and when it talks about the angels, it says, an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. Today is born in the city of David a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ. This will be a sign to you." And it goes on. Then in verse 13, suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, on earth, peace on men whom his favor rests." And then 15, immediately, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven. So maybe they did rise, but how did they get there? They might not have, you don't think they might have come from maybe that's where we get that, though.
Yeah.
Where it says that's how they left. They went up into the heavens.
Well, I mean, you think about Jesus ascended into the heaven, but we
Right.
don't call him an angel, and he didn't have wings.
Right.
So,
But
I mean, they could have flown, but
They could have.
it's interesting to think about the story that we are like, oh, we've heard it so many times. There's nothing new, and then like read it a different way, and you're like, oh wait, like is that actually how?
Yeah, did
It
we
happened?
just
Did we
infer
just
that?
Make that up?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the wise men being there. Like, did we just make that up to make our nativity scenes look pretty? Like, I don't know.
Complete the same.
Well, Cass, what do you got? You got?
Well, I
anything
just
on there?
think like it's very interesting that it points out that they were terrified. And I mean, obviously that's a scary thing. Angels appear and then a whole heavenly host of them appear. So obviously that's terrifying, but I like that it points that out and then later it says, but they went. So I think that's kind of, sometimes we get called to do things and it's okay
to be
to
scared.
be scared. It's okay. Those are normal emotions to have. Like, it's okay for us to be, scared in the moment, but you still have to act and you still have to do something.
What's important is the follow through,
right.
right?
And so I just like that, pointing out of that, because obviously, you would be scared in that situation.
Yeah.
But they didn't let the fear stop them.
Yeah, and I like, and one thing that sometimes I guess we, the peacefulness of where those shepherds were working. Out in the field. I love to be outside, sitting around the fire, in the night, and it's so peaceful. And I can just see them sitting out on the hillside with a little, campfire, maybe, warming their hands a little bit, or maybe roasting a weenie or a marshmallow, Kins.
There you go.
But they might have been doing that, they might have been. But whatever they were doing, I'm sure it was very peaceful, very quiet. And all of a sudden, now, this heavenly host of angels singing, and it had to be beautiful singing, and it had to be something they were not accustomed to seeing, and probably had never been out like that. They might have seen such in their life, but they didn't see it out while they were tending sheep, did they?
But you think about, you're outside and it's nighttime and somebody sneaks up on you, and you're like, well, at least I'm very jumpy. So I picture like jumping out of my skin when, you know, you're just hanging with your sheep there, chilling outside, maybe taking you a little nap, and all of a sudden all these people appears from nowhere and start singing.
Which I feel like that's like one of the almost supporting arguments of that they look like normal people. Because if they showed up with halos and wings, you'd just be like, oh, angel. But if you just got like all of a sudden an army of like people, you'd be like, what in the world? What is about to happen to me? But I just feel like that's even more of a reason they were probably freaked out, is all of a sudden they're surrounded by folks and they look just like them. They don't know that they're from heaven.
Yeah. And, you know, in verse 15, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. And then verse 16, so they hurried off. Mm-hmm. They didn't say, well, we'll go after a while.
We'll go tomorrow.
Yeah.
After
so
we rest.
They realized this was news that needed to be addressed immediately, and they were excited about it.
Yeah.
Because I think the fact they hurried off, you know, tells you they were excited. They wanted to go see. Because the angels had said, this will be a sign to you. When you see this baby wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger, you're going to know that this is Jesus. You know, you're going to know that this is the Savior. Because sometimes when I think about the words, like we almost have it memorized when we read the Christmas story. But the part where it says, this will be a sign unto you. You know, they didn't just say, now go on down there and find that baby. Or that baby might be in a hospital down there. They didn't say that. They said, this will be a sign to you. You will find the baby. They gave them specifics, didn't they? You know, they told them, when you see this, you're going to know that what we're telling you is the truth, because this is what you're about to find, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, it's good to reread it and think of it in different ways, and because there's a lot of gaps that can be filled in, isn't there? Or, you know, that we have this in our mind of how this looked on this night. But, yeah, to me it's always been very impressive that the shepherds were the first to go out and, you know, spread the news after Jesus' birth. So, anything else y'all got about them?
I like in verse 10 where it was saying, the angel said to them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. And I mean, going back to kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning, like this is not like the in crowd people. Like this is the people who are always excluded, and this is the group of outsiders. So to hear like something is coming to you, like this
joy.
This is even for
people.
you. I think, you know, that's got to play into the hastening of let's go, because they were finally like reconciled back to the plan of God and not pushed out into the fields. And that had to just be like so affirming to them of like, oh, I am seen and I am a part of this.
Yeah.
Let's go. Like that's so cool to finally be brought back into the fold here. And that's I feel like that had to be just like immediately put a smile on their face of like, oh my gosh, you picked me. Like let's go see.
Yeah, let's go see. We're the first here, and you know, and the word all people. I mean, sometimes when we read over it, we kind of gloss right on past that, don't we? And we don't get that he did it for all people, not just the lower class shepherds, but for the royalty, all the way down to even lower than the shepherds. Well, I don't know what that was at the time, but for all people, you know, and the fact that always gets said during the Christmas story, but sometimes we miss it. Yeah, that's good. That's good to know that, you know, what was done for all people. And it was good tidings of great joy. Not just a little bit of joy, but great joy, you know. And sometimes at Christmas we forget that, don't we? We forget great joy. We get, like I just came from Walmart, and there ain't a whole lot of joy going on at Walmart. There's a bunch of hurrying, there's a bunch of rushing around, and, you know, everybody's trying to find what they're trying to find, and ain't a whole lot of joy. But that's what Christmas is all about, is the great joy that was brought to all people by what God did for us in sending Jesus, you know, so that we could be reconciled to him. So, yeah, okay, so that took care of the shepherds, right? So who else we got in the angels too? We kind of talked about both. We'd previously talked about Gabriel, that had been the angel that actually identified himself when he appeared to Zechariah, and then also identified himself as Gabriel when he spoke to Mary. And we don't know if it was the same angel that appeared to Joseph when he had the dream, because they didn't tell us. It could have very well been, right? And I was saying last week about when Gabriel appeared to, well, gracious, I forgot which Micah. When he appeared to Micah, he identified himself as Gabriel back in the Old Testament and had talked about the forthcoming of the Messiah, that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. So Gabriel had a whole lot, maybe his assigned task was, let's get Jesus into the world, because he kind of took care of a lot of the preliminary and a lot of the stuff there for the birth of Jesus. So he really was the big dog of the angels, wasn't he? Or I guess still is. I guess he's still up there doing that. But that he got to handle that important task from a lot of different angles there, all the way back to the book of Micah. Okay, so who else we want to talk about? We got anybody else to talk about?
I'll just say this. I know y'all have talked about her already, but just when we were looking at that passage from Luke, after the shepherds came and visited, it said Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. And I just think about how cool it would be to be I mean, she's cool. And she's got Gabriel, who's already come and kind of told her what's going to happen. She's got Joseph, who's decided to stand by her. But I just think about she was a human. And so to know myself in that situation, I would still be doubting. I'm like, okay, this isn't really what he said. Yeah, I'm going to have a baby, but this isn't anything special. And then to have the shepherds show up that night and be like, we were sent here for you by a band of angels that came to our flock. I mean, I just think how affirming that had to be for her. Yes. Of God really wanted to make sure she knew what was going on. And I think it's a very understatement to say she pondered these things. I'd be thinking about them all the time. It would just be a mild little pondering and be like, holy moly, hey Joseph, you remember when the shepherds showed up that time? Yeah. I just think it's nice to see God though kind of calming the doubts that I'm sure she had and calming the fears that would be so natural in anybody. Yeah. So I just like that thought. And
we talked about the first week about Elizabeth and how I had never thought about the fact that was really such a gift for Mary, that she had the comfort and the wisdom and the companionship and the encouragement from Elizabeth at a time when, like you said, Mary had to be her humanness had to be showing through and going, oh my goodness, I'm a little worried. I don't know what. I mean, plus she was having a baby, which is scary even
under normal
circumstances. But and then the way this section ended there was the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. So everything those angels told them, it wasn't, well, I can see that maybe that was, no, it was exactly as it had been told to them by the angels. And they returned glorifying. Don't you know they was glorifying? They were like, woohoo, buddy, we got to see that, that is cool, And then if we switch gears right here a little bit to the other people who were generally seen as part of the nativity, when you see the nativity played out, the wise men, which is believed, I've read several things, and one said they believed that the wise men showed up between the time Jesus was 40 days old up until 2 years old, but it was more believed it was closer to him being 2 years old when the wise men actually finally made it to them. I hope all of y'all got to see the Star of Bethlehem, kind of what they think it might have looked like last night, and maybe it's supposed to be again tonight too. We tried looking at it with a telescope. We couldn't even focus on the moon, much less that. But we could see it with the binoculars. We could see the two distinct planets, and that's pretty cool because with the naked eye, you couldn't tell there was two distinct planets, but looking through the binoculars, you could. Anyway, so that was a pretty cool thing to happen right here, almost at Christmas. So I know there was a lot more to that star than the one we looked at last night, because that was, the Bible even tells us it was moved and guided them. It didn't just hang there in the sky. It literally guided them to the baby Jesus. Do y'all have anything to add about the wise men? And that's back, in Matthew?
Yeah, Matthew 2.
Matthew 2, we talk about the visit of the Magi or the wise men. So what do y'all have to add about them?
This isn't as much about the wise men as it is Herod.
Okay.
been digging into Herod recently, and
Uh-huh.
he's just a fascinating guy. But I think about him, he had this huge, like, palace and super comfortable house, and I mean, he was rich as everything. He had all of this power. And so to see him become, like, pretty paranoid and scared about the potential of losing that, I think it's kind of reflective of us today of, oh, if we really acknowledge who Jesus came to be, if we really accept him for who he is, he might disrupt my life. Like, what if I have to give up my weekends? Like, what if I lose my friends or, like, my comfortable schedule? And so I think for the wise men to kind of be the deliverers of that paranoia and scaredness that Herod was experiencing, that kind of resulted in him then going and killing the babies to try to save his throne. I think it's sometimes humbling to look at him and be like, okay, we're all kind of scared, though sometimes, if we're really honest, like, what is the truth of Jesus gonna do to our lives? And, like, are we willing to let him come and do that? Are we willing to give up the throne? And I think the wise men have, like, such a huge part in that, and, like, drawing the distinction of, hey, like, this was a big deal. Herod believed in Jesus.
And
like,
it even said that it caused a great disturbance.
yeah, like, everybody knew this
everybody-
was the real deal. And
So it had to be like a big band of folks. You know, we typically say 3 wise men, but there could have been hundreds of people in this caravan of, because they, you know, it wouldn't have been safe for 3. They would have got beat up like the guy in the Good Samaritan story. They'd have got beat up and, you know, left for dead, and all their stuff would have been stolen had they not traveled with a big band of people. But yeah, you know, that they came, and it's got to make you kind of wonder, like, so they made their way to the palace to talk to Herod. And do we need to just read this? Well, I don't think we've read any of this, have we, Cass? Did we read this last week? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
We'll just pick and choose some to read as we go, but make sure that you guys read all of chapter 2 there of Matthew. That's where this story comes from. But you know, the Herod called the Magi secretly and found out the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search. And as soon as you find him, report to me that I too may go and worship." Well, he didn't have no intention of going to worship. What he wanted to know is, you know, what y'all find so I can go kill him, you know, right? Because he was worried about that this king was going to take his throne. And after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they'd seen went ahead of them and guided them. And when they saw it, they were overjoyed. I like you know, they're using the word overjoyed again. And on coming to the house, not coming to the manger, but coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him, and they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And then they were warned in a dream, so they didn't go back and tell Herod what they had found. But also, when we talked a little bit about this, when we talked about Joseph, the wise men brought the means financially, which allowed Joseph to take Mary and baby Jesus and escape, because they otherwise would not have had the means, the money to pick up and move. So that's another thing here. And you talk about Mary pondering things in her heart. Well, how about this? How about that? Look outside, here comes a white big caravan of folks, and they come and give you a bunch of money, or treasures, which translate to money, gold, frankincense, myrrh. They bring all that and lay it down for you, for your baby. You know, they recognize, and you got to wonder what the conversations were there. You know, I wonder. I mean, obviously they spoke either the same language as Herod, or they had translators with them. So I wonder the conversation that happened between those wise men and Mary and Joseph. You know, we don't get that, but you got to kind of say, well, what you mean? You saw a star and you followed it here. What? You know? But isn't that cool? Okay. I always think that's pretty cool. That Mary must have been like, hey, somebody's at the door. Oh my Lord, who's that? That ain't UPS. That ain't FedEx. So they're making deliveries. They on camels. They got all kinds of stuff. But that would have been a little scary too, wouldn't it? But you know, at this time you got to kind of figure Mary's used to. I mean, she's already experienced the faithfulness of God. She knows that God's going to take care of this in the way you know.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time though, they didn't realize they were needing the money. You know, it wasn't because I think in verse 13 down there in the same chapter, when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. So it makes you wonder, like, they came, brought all these goodies, and it doesn't say how long after. It doesn't say that night, but it could have very well been that night after they had, because that's when the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, after they had gone, you know, after the wise men had gone. So we don't know what time period, but that's pretty cool too. I mean, you know, and you think about this, it could have been that night, it could have been a day or two later, it could have been several weeks, you know, we don't really know. But we know that Herod was over there getting mad because when he found out those wise men had betrayed him and not come back, he said, well, I'll just take care of this. I'll just kill all the babies that might have been born during that time period, right? Mm-hmm. And that had to be an awful thing, and to people just have their babies snatched up and murdered, you know. But all that also was prophesied. I don't know exactly right where it came from, but I remember the prophecy was that there will be, you know, crying, loud wails from, I don't know.
Jeremiah.
Okay, Jeremiah is where it was predicted, and because of the babies that would be murdered.
Jeremiah 31:15.
Okay, all right, well, good. Jeremiah 31:15 predicted that the babies would be killed. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So just to go back and recap the story, is there anything you guys want to cover that we've already talked about that you want to talk about again, or that you have thought about and want to add to, or do we have any comments from anybody that's watching that wants to? Nobody?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, do y'all have something?
I think it's been fun to go through the story this way because it kind of makes you focus your lens on different things, and really like zooming in on one character at a time makes you notice things that you might not notice when you're just reading a story you've heard so many times. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been fun to look at it this way. Yeah,
I've liked it too. I hope that you guys have enjoyed going through this character by character with us and talking about the story. And I hope that, you know, something's been brought up that you hadn't thought of before. Kens, what you got?
I mean, I just think it's cool. You know, this is obviously a story that we all know super well, and I think the downside of that is we typically tend to mush all of the Gospels together into one. And I think it's really fascinating just to go back and, like we were talking about earlier, like which one has the wise men, because they're only in one, mm-hmm. and which one has the shepherds, because they're not in all of them.
Right.
And so to like go and see, okay, what was the intention behind this author choosing to either include or omit this part of the story? And so I think it's extra interesting to step back and just kind of try to let the whole story that we've woven together over the years, like let that go and try to just read it for, okay, let's see what Matthew has to say. Like, why does John put it this way? What is Luke trying to get across? And, you know, just like looking at this, like Matthew was the most Old Testament sided gospel. Like he used it the most because he was appealing to a Jewish audience, which would have been why it was so important for the wise men to come and kind of like confirm, like, oh, he did fulfill all of these prophecies, and this is a really big deal. And then Luke was to the outcasts, and so it was important for him to include the shepherds, but it might not have been important for them to, you know, switch that. And so I think it's really interesting to like honor the gospel writers as individuals and see like, okay, what is the significance of you putting this in here, and how does it play into the rest of just your story without mushing them together? Because you almost lose kind of the beauty of why they're in there if you're like putting Matthew's words in the mouth of Luke. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fun to do too.
Yeah, so they were appealing to different audiences and telling the audiences what they needed to know about the story. Mm-hmm. So it makes you kind of wonder, you know, what else. I'm sure there was tons of other things that we could have been told. Mm-hmm. I know they think that Luke's version came from Mary. Mary actually, you know, was interviewed for that. So that we get that about Mary pondering in her heart. I'm sure that was her words, you know, or something similar to, you know, I kept all this, you know. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and so you get a little different view. So what stuck out to y'all of the things that we've talked about? Is anything like really like made you go, wow, I never thought about that. Because for me, it was the relationship between Elizabeth and Mary. Just getting a grasp on the fact that had to be such a comfort to Mary in her time of uncertainty and needing some support, you know, and there was an older relative who was trusted and known and was going through a similar situation that the angel just happened to mention, not just happened to, but intentionally said to her, hey, Elizabeth's already in her 6th month, you know, and she's conceived a child, which, you know, shows that all things are possible with God. So the angel was even saying to her, hey, you know, kind of putting a bug in her ear, like, you might want to go see her. You know, he didn't say that, but you kind of get it that she would be inspired to, hey, you know, I need to go and see her, you know. And so then that offered some comfort. But did y'all find similar things like that to in the things we've talked about? Or
Well, I think it's just like what you were saying of it comes up a lot that they want to make sure you realize as the reader of whichever one you're looking at that everybody's included, whether it's old Elizabeth or baby Mary, if it's poor shepherds or the kings of wise men.
Right.
Like, I mean, you see all of this happening, whether it's, you know, the faithful Mary and Joseph, or, I mean, even Herod, he was terrible and he was still a part of it.
Part
and
of
so
the
it's
story,
like saying, hey, God uses all pieces of this to create a story to make sure that you know that whatever your piece is, like you're wanted in the midst of it.
That's a good point, because I hadn't thought about that either. Like every class of people is represented between the story in Matthew and the story in Luke. You get you can find yourself somewhere in between that, can't you?
Yeah.
You know, between a young virgin girl who's unmarried and now going to have a baby, to an old lady who's having a baby, to the richest magi, to the lowliest shepherd. You know, somewhere we can all find ourselves in that story. And for our whole life, we can find somebody in there that we identify with. Yeah. Cass, what about you? Did you have something?
No, I kind of agree with all of that, and I really liked looking at Mary a little bit deeper because, I mean, I think when you know the story so well, it can be easy just to kind of, you know, gloss over things. But I really liked kind of, you know, taking a deeper look into her and what, you know, that really meant and felt like to be her in those
Because sometimes we just set her up on a pedestal, don't we? And say, that Mary, now she was a good person and she was good and she honored God, but we don't think about from a human aspect what she must have gone through emotionally and the fears and the, you know, like not knowing, the uncertainty. But then in spite of the fears and the uncertainty, there was one certainty, and that was that she trusted God. She said to the angel, the most beautiful thing to me in the story is when she said, let it be to me as you have said, I am the servant of God. You know, that's a kind of faith that really, you know, makes you know why he picked Mary to be the mother of Jesus, because, you know, that kind of faith is impressive, isn't it? To be scared, to be uncertain, to know that your life is about to be really up in shaking around, and still to know and to say, you know, I trust God. Let it happen to me however it needs to, because ultimately I know God is in control. And I think that's something that we can take and especially hold on to this 2020 year, but every day. But at Christmas, it's a great time for us to be reminded of that, isn't it? You know, though your life may hit ups and downs, and it will, we all will, ups and downs in our life, that there is one constant, and that is that we can trust in God and his faithfulness, because he will give us the way to get through something, you know. So
well, I think it's extra like inspirational for us to look at Mary, because I mean, she was what, 12 or 13, and according to the Levitical law, like, could have been killed for having a baby that wasn't the person that she was engaged to. And so to not really know the outcome yet, and to still sit there and say, whatever you got, like, bring it on, like, I'm here for it. I think of a 6th grader essentially being in that position and having to say that. I couldn't do it. Like, you came to 6th grade Kinsey, I'd be like, heck no. Like, go to Cass, go to her. But I mean, I think it's just, like we were talking about, of you have Elizabeth, who's the older, like, faithful one, and then you see the young people still be faithful too. Like, you can't count or discount any age, any profession, any class. Like, everybody can reflect the faithfulness of the Lord.
And everybody has received the love of God through Jesus. And, in this story, you see the miracle, which is the birth of Jesus, and then you see the miracle, which is the birth of John the Baptist. Both were miracles, and one to an old lady and one to a young lady, but neither way could have happened without the intervention of God, and He's still performing miracles for us even today. And sometimes we forget that. We think the Bible's full of miracles, but they don't happen today, but they do. He's still the same God with the same power, still has the same capabilities as He had during this time. And He's still providing for all people, joy for all people. All right. Well, y'all got anything else that you want to throw out there for everybody? Well, I think from the Butlers to everybody out there, we wish y'all a Merry Christmas. And we appreciate y'all, sharing your lives with us on the Roots and Wings group, and your comments and your support. We appreciate that. It's been a great year. We're almost to the point of where this group started in January, but this specific group started in June. So we're about 6 months in with this group. And we appreciate y'all. We appreciate y'all following and talking and, your prayers and your support. We appreciate it very much. So Merry Christmas, everybody. And I'll close us out with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this Christmas season. Thank you for baby Jesus. And Lord, thank you for all that you have done for us, your faithfulness. Lord, thank you for this Bible story that tells us so many things that we need to aspire to be. Lord, help us to be faithful. Help us to be always, dependent on you and eager to do your will. And Lord, help us to hurry like the shepherds did, to do your will, to spread your word. Lord, we just pray that this Christmas season that we'll all remember Jesus and the reason that we're celebrating. And Lord, I just pray that joy will fill our hearts and our lives because of Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And good night and Merry Christmas, y'all.